President Biden said yesterday that Ukrainian lives are being lost because of political games being played in Washington. Is that right? Is that a fair challenge? And he seemed to take a lot of issue with what he claimed was the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy's, not standing up to the deal or not meeting the deal that he had signed back in June, along with President Biden, on the debt ceiling issue that was rampant during the summer.
We cannot, under any circumstance, allow American support for Ukraine to be interrupted. I fully expect the Speaker to keep his commitment to secure the passage and support needed to help Ukraine as they defend themselves against aggression and brutality. The vast majority of both parties, I'll say it again, Democrats and Republicans, Senate and House, support helping Ukraine and the brutal aggression that's being thrust upon them by Russia. Stop playing games. Get this done.
Okay, so a couple things there in that first clip there. First of all, we cannot allow this to stop. Okay, if you're going to make that claim, then you need to tell me why. Why can we not allow this to stop? And a very important part of that discussion is towards what end? Look, this is one of my biggest pet peeves about our government, military, political, every other way you want to look at it. What are you trying to accomplish? If you're telling the American people they have to get this done and they have to support, they have to continue supporting, you need to tell them very emphatically why. And it needs to be something that makes sense and something that's attainable in a reasonable amount of time at a cost that's commensurate to whatever we gain. And you need to tell me, what are we going to gain? And thus far, the administration is not telling us any of that stuff. They don't say why it is in our national interest to do this. They tell us why it's an aspiration that we want Ukraine to be free and democratic. And okay, that's fine on the surface. That's reasonable. But you need to go much more than that. I need specifics if I'm, as an American, going to support this policy. And if you have to convince me that actually this is necessary, not just a good idea, but necessary, because he's using language here that says we must do this. So you need to, first of all, explain to us why this is in our interest. And so far, nothing has been offered other than we have to stop aggression. Well, there's no aggression coming to us. Okay, so the United States military and our budget does not exist to make sure other countries have everything they need all over the world. I mean, why go only with this one? It makes sense if and only if protecting that country also protects us. Like if we were in the line of fire next, for example, and I know a lot of people cite that. That is nonsense. As we've talked about in many previous episodes of Deep Dive, there is no physical capacity for Russia to roll past Ukraine into NATO. They can't do it even if they wanted to. And of course, they're definitely conventionally not going to be able to cause any problems for the United States that we can't easily handle, which Putin knows, ergo, he's not going to do it. Okay, that's the first point. The second point from that clip is he makes this comment in there that says that he wants the speaker to do what he said he was going to do. Okay, I've heard this already on lots of news reports, and people put his comments in there or other like-minded comments, just making a statement that the Speaker of the House didn't do what he said he would do in the June deal. Now, it's important to know, and they don't talk about it, what was in that June deal? What did they say? What did the Speaker McCarthy agree to? And there were many things that were in that deal. And of course, that was not a negotiation over funding Ukraine. That was a negotiation over keeping our country from defaulting, and so that the debt ceiling would not be burst through. Now, as a part of that, there was a segment on defense spending, and it was generally on defense spending. It was most assuredly not specifically on funding Ukraine. That was a subset of other things that needed to be done in there, and McCarthy was clear from almost the very beginning. On at least on the 6th of June in the Washington Post, he was very clear that he said, we are going to take that up separately, and later that's not part of this deal. So first of all, there's no direct statement that Ukraine funding would be in the next budget at the end of the fiscal year. Those are separate issues completely. So he's not violating anything. That's a separate issue, which he said from the beginning, and it is. That was a debt ceiling issue negotiation between Biden and McCarthy. It was not for the budget at the end of the year. So that's important to note. Now, let's look at another segment of what the president had to say, that people are actually dying in Ukraine because of our political games.
Mr. President, what are your words to U.S. allies, and in particular Zelensky, on continued funding for Ukraine? How can you reassure them?
I can reassure them, look at me, we're going to get it done. I can't believe those who voted for supporting Ukraine, overwhelming majority in the House and Senate, Democrat and Republican, will, for pure political reasons, let more people die needlessly in Ukraine.
Okay, nobody in America is letting anybody die. Let's just get that right off the top. That is an emotional appeal that is not based on reality. It's not. The issue about whether somebody lives or dies in Ukraine lives and dies with the president of Ukraine and on their war plans and what they're doing on the battlefield. It does not have to do with whether we perpetually fund them at whatever level that they deem fit. But even more important than that, this is an issue, again, of what is in America's best interest. And right now, those are not the issues. To say that's for purely political reasons, no, it's not for political reasons that we're kind of, people are asking legitimate questions. Me being one of them, but I'm not the only one, of course. There's many of us who are watching this video are wondering, why do we need to do this? But don't tell me that it's just that we're going to let people die in Ukraine, because again, that implies, without stating it, that we have to supply Ukraine forever, that this has to be the next forever war we support, that any even talk about funding it is going to cost their lives. No, there's very rational decisions that can be made in Kiev about coming to a negotiated settlement. They have the power to end this war as well. It's popular for us to say, yeah, Putin could stop this war by putting down his arms and going home tomorrow. That's true. Technically speaking, that's true. But it's equally true that Ukraine can end the war by having a negotiated settlement and seeking a ceasefire, which Russia has indicated they would be willing to consider. But it's not the only path that we have to just blanket support forever. Now, that's an important issue to understand. There is no need for this. There has been no agreement towards that end. The next part here is more again in the lines of hyperbole and trying to make an emotional plea. President Biden was asked this.
Are you concerned about America's reputation on the world stage, given the level of brinksmanship we've seen this year?
Based on the mega Republican report, yes. Based on what my administration is doing, no.
You know, when the president ran for office, he said he wanted to help restore the soul of America, and he wanted to bring people together and didn't want it to be an us versus them kind of a thing. And look, this is not helpful. This says that, yes, anyone who agrees with me is doing the right thing. And this, tells the world public that America is good if they do what we want to do. And then singling out the MAGA group. Look, that's a large portion of America. And anybody who knows the things that I've written, I'm not a blanket supporter of what they call the MAGA group or President Trump's policies. I've support those that he's done that were good, and I've taken issue with those things that are not. And I think that's what any reasonable American would do, is they'll take issues on their subject, but they're not going to put a blanket category over everything one side does. And to do that is not helpful here. So basically, the president is saying everybody who supports Make America Great Again is wrong, is bad, and is making America look wrong. And everything that his side does is doing good. So none of it's our fault. It's all their fault. That's not helpful. It's not true, but it's also not helpful, because you basically insult everybody who believes in a certain way. People who may agree with 30% of what Trump says, maybe they agree with him on some other stuff. But when you just blanket say all the MAGA people are wrong, then you've lost potentially people who would support a number of your issues here. And so that's one of the things we have to fix. This is a bit of a sidebar here, but that's one of the things that's most wrong with American politics. And certainly there's plenty on the right that do this to demonize those on the left. And that'll be the subject of a future deep dive here, which is kind of important. But I just wanted to point that out here, because even in the context of what we're talking about, support for Ukraine, that's not helpful. The last section I wanted to cover here in any detail, President Biden repeats something that used to be a hallmark really of generations of Americans, to our detriment, I'll point out, but he resurrected it here. And here's what he said of America.
We are the indispensable nation in the world, internationally and domestically, in terms of our economy. Let's act like it. Let's act like it. Stop the games.
Okay. Indispensable nation. That's really arrogant and presumptuous. Look, don't get me wrong. I'm certainly not bashing America. Nobody loves their country more than I do. I spent 21 years of my life on active service, including 4 combat deployments, put my life on the line for our country very willingly. I love America. It is accurate to say we're an important nation. It's very true to say that we have a lot of high morals and values and capabilities and ability to help others. And something that has been one of the hallmarks of America for centuries is that we're willing to make sacrifice for others, and we can help things, and we seek to help those who are less fortunate. You know, we spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year helping other nations and other people, and that's legitimate and a big positive on our country. But when you go too far and say that we're an indispensable nation, what that has been a cover for is that we know what's better for other people. We know better than they do what's better for them, and we're going to help them out. Also meaning we're going to do whatever we want to do because the world can't get by without us. And that's not true. It's not. We need to do what is best for our country, as every other country needs to do what's best for their country. That's the way any government of any country in the world, whether we hate them, whether we love them, whether it's neutral, it doesn't matter. That government serves that people. Our government serves our people. So we're indispensable for ourselves because we have to look out for ourselves. And so we do get to make the decisions. That's what democracy is about, that we get to make the decision of what our country does and what it doesn't do. But when you start saying that we're indispensable for the rest of the world, then that means that we can now just decide what's going to happen in Russia, Ukraine. We can decide this is a part of our problem with the Russia-Ukraine war. We decide that Russia's bad, Ukraine's good. So let's just make sure that Russia loses, because that's what we want to happen, because we're the indispensable nature. That's what we think, a nation. But look, if the reality on the ground doesn't match that, it doesn't matter how much you want to brag on yourself to say you're indispensable. It doesn't matter how much you think you want to do something. If the physical realities don't support that, you are not smart, and it's foolish to try to accomplish something that can't be accomplished in the name of we're indispensable. That covers over many sins and blinds people to what the reality of the ground situation is, and leads to bad policies. And this is one of those cases here. The bottom line for this whole press conference is we don't have an obligation to continue spending money. We've spent $113 billion so far. Apparently the administration wants another $100 billion. Okay, that's in there right there. The administration there were elected by the people. If they want to lead that way, then it's valid for them to want to. But they have to provide compelling evidence for the American people, because it is the agreement of the governed that confers legitimacy on the government. So they don't get to tell us what's going to happen. We get to tell them what they're going to do in our name. That's the way the system is set up. That's the way it's supposed to work. And we have to start standing up and recognizing that we have a little more power than we believe we do. But it's time for the administration to start recognizing they work for us and not the other way around. And so if they can't provide compelling reasons why we need to give another $100+ billion, then we're not going to give it. And if there is, then okay, put that on the table. Now, obviously, as I argue, there's not anything for them to put on the table. But in the absence of compelling information, all we hear is emotional pleas, insults on those who don't agree with us, and claims that we're going to get this done. The president doesn't have the authority under the Constitution to just tell other nations, don't worry about it, we're going to get this done. You don't have the authority to do that. You rely on Congress. That's why we have separation of powers, congressional and the administration. So he can't say that. So he has to tell you why you should support it, and then he has to rely on negotiation between separate branches of our government, or this is not going to get done, and he should not be promising something he may not be able to keep. Now, there's one more thing I want to talk about here, which is a part of this same press conference, but somewhat different than the issue of whether or not we should give money to Ukraine. And I want you to see this last little clip of how this press conference ended.
Are you going to be able to trust Speaker McCarthy when the next deal comes around?
We just made one about Ukraine, so we'll find out.
But are you worried that he is going to be forced by fellow Republicans to back away from any deal he cuts with you?
I hope this experience for the Speaker has been one of a personal revelation. I'm not being facetious. Anyway.
Look, I have nothing personally against President Biden. He's the president of the United States. Doesn't matter if I voted for him, like it doesn't matter if I voted for any of the other presidents of our past. He is the president of the United States, duly elected, and it is in my desire, my interest to support the president. And I want him to succeed no matter who he or she is, because if they succeed, we all succeed. But it's also true that we have to be looking at reality here. Now, this clip here is nothing that's unusual. We've seen tons of these, and a lot of people use them to make fun of the president, which I am most surely not doing here. But we have to be honest and admit there is something not right here. I mean, here on a very important issue, on a pretty short press conference, the president stopped in mid-sentence, completely lost track of what he was talking about, didn't even finish the thought, and then just said, whatever. You talk about something that could potentially make our allies and our friends and potential adversaries not respect us and send the wrong signal. It's this, because people have to wonder, is the leader of the most powerful nation on earth really capable of continuing to perform his duties? And of course, when this gets into the election season, and that's a whole nother, but I'll actually not even touch on that. I'm sure that any other people will talk about that, but I'm talking about the here and now. And before we even talk about what's going to happen in another year from now, and then the next administration in 2025, who that should be, we've got to get there. This is a serious issue, and one that deserves the right amount of consideration. Can the president continue to be relied on to make these kinds of hard decisions and live up under the stress and the pressure that's going on and continue to do the job that we've hired him to do with our votes? And I just worry about the president. I pray for him, and this is a genuine statement, every single day, because I want him to succeed, because I want our country to succeed. But I would not be honest if I didn't say that these kinds of clips like you just saw are concerning to me. This is a legitimate issue that has very serious ramifications, and it's something that's really concerning to me. And I bet it's concerning to you. That's it for the deep dive today. We'll see you on the next episode.